when a young black man walked in wearing a simple suit. He wasn't flashy, didn't demand attention, yet eyes followed him anyway. A wealthy white couple lounging in the VIP section sneered as he paused near their table. Moments later, the manager whispered something, and the couple burst out laughing. Everyone expected the man to walk away quietly. But then, he uttered 7 calm words that made the entire place go silent. "I own this entire place, actually." His name was Eli Thompson, a self-made billionaire whose story most people never knew. Born in the heart of Atlanta's forgotten neighborhoods, Eli grew up surrounded by struggle. His mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and his father, a mechanic, passed away before Eli turned 10. But from a young age, Eli had a spark, an unshakable drive to turn adversity into something greater. He studied hard, earning scholarships that took him from local community centers to the nation's top universities. By his late 20s, he had built a successful technology startup that transformed digital logistics across America. Yet despite his achievements, Eli always carried himself with quiet humility. He didn't crave recognition, only respect. That night, he decided to celebrate his mother's 60th birthday at a high-end restaurant downtown, a place known for exclusivity and a client list filled with celebrities and CEOs. Eli had purchased the entire restaurant chain a year earlier under a holding company name, deliberately keeping his ownership low-key. He wanted to see if the place lived up to its promise of luxury for all. When he walked in early to reserve his mother's favorite table, a private VIP section near the window, he didn't expect confrontation. But prejudice rarely sends invitations. The couple sitting there didn't even glance up at him as he arrived. Instead, they flagged down the manager, whispering and smirking, assuming he didn't belong. The staff hesitated, unsure what to do, torn between assumptions and appearances. That hesitation revealed something deeper than mere misunderstanding. It was the silent, everyday arrogance that said, "People like you don't belong here." Eli had seen prejudice in many forms before. From investors who doubted his leadership to people surprised that someone like him could afford first-class seats, he had learned to stay calm. But there was something different about that moment, something sharp in the laughter of the couple who now openly mocked him. The man, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, leaned back with entitlement written across his smirk. The woman beside him tapped her wine glass, saying loudly enough for nearby diners to hear, "Maybe he's lost." The manager approached Eli with a forced smile, suggesting he wait near the entrance. It was the kind of polite rejection built on unspoken prejudice. Eli simply nodded and stepped aside, his gaze wandering around the room. Every table seemed frozen in subtle tension. A few guests glanced curiously, some whispering, others pretending not to notice. His heart sank, not because of the humiliation, but because moments like this were still happening in 2025. He thought of his mother, who had spent her life teaching him grace in the face of injustice. She used to say, "Son, when people try to make you feel small, remind them of your truth, but do it with dignity." So he waited. He waited until the manager excused himself to verify the reservation. The couple, meanwhile, ordered another round, confident that their privilege had spoken for them. Minutes later, Eli received a call from his assistant, confirming that the restaurant staff had failed to recognize him as the owner listed in their internal records. He smiled softly, deciding not to escalate immediately. Instead, he observed the glances, the tone, the hierarchy of judgment disguised as hospitality. Then his mother arrived. Her silver hair framed a face of quiet strength. She wore a modest dress, her eyes lighting up at the sight of her son. But as they approached the VIP section, the same couple scoffed again, assuming she was out of place too. The manager, clearly uncomfortable, tried to redirect them to a smaller table near the kitchen, an insult masked as policy. Eli looked around. The band stopped playing for a moment. Even the servers hesitated mid-step, unsure how to act. The weight of prejudice filled the air like heavy smoke. He wanted to let it go. He wanted to stay invisible, enjoy the evening, and move on. But then he saw the slight flicker of embarrassment in his mother's eyes. That painful, familiar look she had carried decades ago when people had treated her as less than human. That was the breaking point. Eli took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and calmly walked toward the VIP table the couple had claimed as theirs. The manager rushed over, whispering nervously, "Sir, please." But Eli simply raised his hand slightly, signaling him to stop. His expression was calm, composed, but his presence shifted the entire atmosphere. The couple looked up, smirking again, oblivious to the storm they had just summoned. Eli turned to the couple and, without raising his voice, asked the manager if the VIP table belonged to the restaurant or to private guests. The manager stammered, trying to find words, while the diners watched in suspense. Then Eli reached into his pocket, retrieved his phone, and made a single call. Within seconds, the general manager, who wasn't on duty, answered. "Mr. Thompson, good evening. Everything all right?" Eli put the call on speaker and said quietly, "Apparently your staff doesn't recognize their owner tonight." The entire restaurant fell into silence. The couple's smiles vanished. The manager froze, realization spreading across his face. Every guest's eyes widened as the truth settled. This man they had dismissed, this man they had mocked, was not just a guest. He was the owner. Eli didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice or demand apologies. Instead, he looked straight at the couple and said softly, "You don't know someone's story just by looking at them. That table you're sitting at? I bought it, along with every other one in this place, so people like my mother would never feel unwelcome again." The woman's hand trembled as she placed her glass down. The man lowered his gaze, speechless. The staff stood motionless, ashamed. Then Eli turned to his mother, offered her his arm, and gently guided her to their table, the one they had rightfully reserved. The restaurant remained silent, the kind of silence that only truth can create. Not loud, not angry, but profoundly humbling. As the band quietly resumed playing, no one could meet his eyes. The couple slowly gathered their belongings and left without another word. Dinner that night was quiet but meaningful. Eli's mother, ever composed, simply smiled and said, "You handled that with grace." She didn't need to say more. The moment spoke for itself. The next day, news of the incident spread after one of the waiters anonymously shared what had happened. Social media lit up with praise, calling Eli the silent billionaire who humbled ignorance. But Eli never addressed it publicly. He didn't believe in revenge. He believed in awareness. A week later, he introduced a new company policy across all his establishments. Mandatory empathy and diversity training for staff, along with a scholarship fund for minority youth pursuing hospitality management. He wanted to turn humiliation into education, prejudice into progress. The couple who had mocked him never returned. But perhaps they carried something more valuable than a night's embarrassment, a lasting reminder that appearances deceive, and arrogance can cost more than pride. In time, the restaurant became known not just for its luxury, but for its inclusivity. People of all backgrounds dined side by side, unaware that it all began because one man refused to let quiet prejudice pass unchallenged. Eli often returned with his mother sitting by that same window. Every time he did, he looked around the room, not with resentment, but with hope. Hope that someday no one would have to prove their worth before being treated with dignity. And as he gazed out at the city lights, he would think, respect isn't something you earn by wealth or power. It's something every human being deserves from the start. So the next time you find yourself judging someone by how they look, remember this. Behind every face is a story you don't know. And sometimes, the person you look down on might just be the one who built the ground you're standing on.